Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Hip Hop Nation TV. So yeah, man. Today, man, I got the Miss Media around. Yes, been waiting for this interview for a long time. Finally, she rocked out. Welcome, welcome,
Thank you.
Leslie. How are you?
Thanks, Yuri. I'm good, thanks. How are you? Sorry, I didn't
I'm
manage
good,
to make
man.
it home on time, so I'm a bit of a mess, but yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, you're a busy lady. Hey.
Well, when you run your own business, it gets like that.
Yeah, yeah, I totally
Yeah.
understand. Totally understand.
But thanks so
But
much for having me. I appreciate it. Pardon?
how was your day?
Fine, busy. It's the end of the year, and so you've got to get proposals through for next year, and oh, it's a lot.
Yeah,
Wrapping up one year, going into the next year. So it's like a bit crazy. And yourself, how's your day going?
it's all good. It's all good. I'm also on that same lane. Ish. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's busy,
yeah.
and we also gotta prepare for next year's event and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah. So what are your plans for next year?
You remember I told you I'm working with Tommy
Yeah,
Kato.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so me and Kato, we were doing a hip hop event for next year in February.
That's so dope. What's the event about? Was it a secret? Look at me automatically stepping
Sorry?
into interview mode. But
No,
anyway,
no, that's a secret. It's already out. So
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What's it about?
So yeah, we were doing a hip hop event in Vernaging, and so yeah, that's what we do. You're gonna be have artists performing there.
Oh, nice. Kato's from Vereeniging, right?
Sorry?
Is he? Isn't Kato from Vereeniging, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, it's from Val. It's from Val,
Yeah,
from Sharpeville.
yeah. Yeah, that's the one thing. I remember
Yeah,
everybody like it. I always tell people, I'm like, no, in SA, like, everybody's got their corner. You know, if somebody's from here, if they're from there, they're like this, they're like that. I'm like,
yeah,
the whole hip hop game is really like
yeah,
segmented depending on where it is you come from. But I think it's the whole South African music game as a whole. Yeah. So
yeah.
I'm just
Cause,
like,
cause like I
oh,
was speaking. Oh yeah, cause I was speaking to him like a couple of days ago. I was like, "What? You doing an interview with Leslie? That's my sister, dog." So I was like, yeah.
yeah.
I'll
Yeah, Kato's
definitely let her
actually,
know.
it's so funny because I think Kato once bumped into my sister because I've got, yeah, into
Yeah,
one of my sisters. And it was just such a funny story because like she used to get so irritated because she was at uni this because when I was at when I started at Y, it was my first year out of high school.
yeah,
So I was
yeah.
in basically fresh out of high school and I was at uni at the same time, right?
Mm,
And so my
mm,
sister used to get so irritated whenever I'd say her name because she was on campus too. Because all her friends
mm.
would be going on. She'd be like, "Can you stop talking about me? Can you stop mentioning my name?" I was just like, "Oh my gosh." I was always using like material, like her as my material. You know, I'd be like, "Oh, my
Yeah,
sister Phyllis," and then it ended up like all of the people, like a, lo- um, a lot of the rappers and everybody, people knew her. It was just so funny. Then she was getting into parties by being my sister. I'm like, do you see your life? Like, do you see how I've upgraded you just like that? You just give me attitude
yeah,
for nothing.
yeah,
Yeah, and Kato actually knew. Kato actually bumped into my sister the one time, and she didn't know it was
yeah.
Kato or something. And then they
Mm,
had a conversation, and then she comes back to me and she's like, "Oh, this guy," and they're going on about Shine my Shine. She's giving me this whole thing. I said, "What? You were talking to Kato?" So she goes, "I don't know. He was just saying that you took somebody else's side and blah blah blah." She's giving me this whole speech, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this guy!" I literally told him, "I'm like, bruh, like just leave my sister out of it. Like, it's not that
yeah,
serious, you know." Like I'm going home to a
yeah.
very traditional Ugandan home. Don't be putting me on blast there. It was so funny. That's the thing I remember about Kato. Yeah, there was something. He bumped into my sister Phyllis, and he had like a whole
Yeah,
conversation, and she came and told me about
yeah,
it, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is too wild. Yeah, but you must tell
yeah.
him I said what's
Well,
up.
but how is it like, man? You being at the age of 19 and then you entering YFM and
I don't
you're
know.
a
It was just
female in hip hop game.
no. To be honest, it was just like I never grew up thinking of myself in labels and limitations and
Yeah,
all of that. You know, my sisters
yeah,
and
yeah,
I were raised by my dad.
yeah.
You know, and I mean, I'm sure you know that I'm from Uganda originally. And so for
Yeah.
us, like the way that my dad always raised us after my mom had passed away was he was very much about just being yourself. You know what I mean? Minus the
Mm,
fact that he didn't
mm,
love doing the hip hop stuff, but that's a whole different story. But he was very much
yeah.
like, he really instilled in my sisters and I, like, to just be ourselves. So I never really thought of myself from the perspective of my race, from the perspective of, like, my gender. I never thought of myself like that. I just was like, like, for all I mean, many people who are close to me will know that I was like a daddy's girl. So that I just thought of myself like that. So when I went into
Oh.
the industry, I ended up there. It was by mistake because I never intended to be on radio. It wasn't
Yeah.
the end game. And so yeah, I just was always myself, and I'd always grown up. I'd always like loved hip hop. My sisters and I, in
Mm,
fact, my dad was the one who was going overseas and buying us all of the music, ironically.
mm,
So yeah, I just went and I represented like who I was. There was never, I never thought of myself as like, oh my gosh, I'm the only girl. It's all these guys. I never thought of myself like that. I just thought like I knew what I was
mm,
doing. I knew why I was there, and I did
mm.
it. I never actually. The only thing that was nerve wracking was that when I went into the industry, I didn't know what I was doing.
Leslie, um, pardon.
Sorry, my network.
Yeah, yeah, there's a network. You were saying?
Okay, cool. But now I can't hear you again. You're a bit muffled.
Okay, can you hear me?
Speak again?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, the only thing about going to YFM was the fact that everybody had, I mean, by the time I got to everybody already had established brands. Everybody
Yeah.
was already, not even like YFM was already like the YFM. And so
Yeah.
it was just more than anything. And of course, people had been friends for longer, and
Mm,
they'd been in the industry for, before me and so forth. So the only
mm,
thing that was a thing was
mm,
the fact that there was already like cliques that were formed, and the fact that everybody had been there
mm,
for longer than me, and it was like all these people that because I had also listened to YFM before I joined YFM, so it was just like
mm,
weird to be like, oh my gosh, that's this person. Oh my gosh, do you get what I mean? That was the only thing that was weird about it. But in terms of being like in terms of being like a woman, in terms of being like all of that stuff, that was never my thing. It was just like,
mm,
I think many people don't realize that, before I joined like Y and everything, I was listening to Rap Activity Jam, all of that stuff. So for me, it was like
mm,
stepping into people. I was like, oh my gosh, like I was like, I used to listen to these people, and here they all are.
mm,
It was
mm,
a mind trip for me. So that was the only thing that was
mm.
crazy about it. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think, yeah.
Yeah. But you being there, I mean, it was so amazing because you brought so many dope MCs there, and it's like you paved the I think your shows really paved the way for a lot of great artists for South African hip hop.
Yeah.
How was that like?
Oh, I mean, I really appreciate that.
Mm,
You know what the crazy thing is? I think it's only in retrospect that I really understood like the impact of the
mm,
show, and
mm,
being part of YFM and everything. Because when I joined, like in general, my life policy is I never ever do anything unless if I
mm,
feel that I can make a difference or make a change.
yeah,
And so for me, whatever I was bringing to radio was already things that I was engaged in the culture already. So I had
yeah,
already known a few of the artists before I actually joined Rap
yeah,
Activity Jam. I mean, not Rap Activity, YFM. Like I'd already met a few people. I already had like
mm,
like bumped into people here and there. So already that. And before I joined YFM and everything, I already had kind of like made a few friends, and the hip hop, the guys in hip hop and the people in hip hop that I knew were the ones who
mm,
fully, how do I say, who fully brought me into South African culture,
mm, yeah,
because like I learned so much and everything. So for me, being on YFM was all I did was represent what I was seeing all the time. I just brought it to the streets. There was nothing else. I just felt like I was a conduit. So it's like the sessions and all of that, going to the sessions and all the people I knew, like I was making all these friends in Cape Town and everything.
yeah, Leslie. Um, okay, seems like we lost it again, guys. Sheesh. Leslie. Yeah, Leslie.
Hi. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
so
seems
sorry.
like we lost it. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yes. Yeah, so I said like for me, being able to be part of what was going on in terms of the movement and the culture, it
Mm,
really was just number one, it was what I was already experiencing. So it wasn't a case of YFM got me into hip hop. I already was into hip
mm,
hop before. My sisters and I, that's
yeah.
what we enjoyed. And then also
Mm,
before I got into YFM, there were a few of the artists that I'd met around the way, and
mm,
all of that. And so being able to be involved in that, for the large part, if I'm honest, I know people talk about the fact that they're no industry friends, but I would
mm,
definitely say that for me, it always felt like a lot of the guys who were involved in hip hop, that I would see at all of the sessions,
mm,
the artists, whatever, across the board, the graphic artists, the DJs, all of that, they
mm,
literally felt like family members to me. Like the hip hop
mm,
culture in South Africa became like family to me. That
mm,
was the first time that I felt that I had a place in South Africa. It was the first time that I
mm,
felt that I belonged, more than anything
mm,
else. And it was the hip hop industry and the hip hop, like all of that stuff. That's what made me feel like made South Africa home for me. And it was
mm,
within the hip hop circles that I really feel that I grew. That I got the confidence to do all it is that I do. So whether it was being on air, on radio, or YMAG, or ending up doing Channel Africa, or eventually working
mm,
with, because I spent a lot of time in Nigeria after I left and I worked with a lot of the
mm,
artists when I was head of Channel Africa, or
mm,
exec producing Big Brother, and just always I was always thrown into things. But I think
mm,
those are all things that I learned from my SA hip hop family, which is why I
mm,
always have this like I don't know how to explain. Like I always have this like affection, because I realize that where I am today is as a result of being able to be part of all that was happening in SA hip hop.
mm,
And I think that one of the things that I always like, I like people to know that, I mean, there were so many things that were going on in SA hip hop, like Le Club, and people going about Le Club, and I'm like,
mm,
guys, number one, I would not have been allowed to enter it, like age wise, I wasn't like
true,
allowed. Number two, Le Club was
true.
before me. You know what I mean? There were so many people who were there before me. I just feel like I was a continuation of what was going on. So whenever it came
Yeah.
to all of that stuff, like who was this, who was the first lady to come up, all that nonsense, I was just like, oh my gosh,
Mm,
this is so crazy. I literally just
yeah.
enjoyed every aspect of the culture. I fully enjoyed it. I fully enjoyed like making all the friends that I made. I fully felt like I had a community and I had a home in South Africa because of hip hop. So whether I always knew that if I needed anything, I mean, it's just so wild to have thought that, oh, you could reach out to DJ Ready D. Like that's insane to me. You know what I mean? Like
Mm,
like when it was
yeah.
happening, the first time I called D, I was like, oh my gosh, like now I have to contact Ready D, or you know what I mean, or
Mm,
being
celebrity.
able to go anywhere, or to speak to anyone, or to go to the sessions, or you know what I mean. And
Mm,
it was just like I always felt like hip hop was home for me. Or every single time I stepped onto the stage for Back to the City, it was insane. Like it was the most it just like I felt like I was serving like a purpose, like every single time in every single moment in SA
mm,
hip hop, whether we were in
mm,
Mafikeng, wherever we were, Cap City, Rap City,
mm,
wherever we were, across the board. And that's the thing about hip hop in SA. It really, for me, a lot of the people that I interacted with, because we were always like around each other, I felt like, yeah, this is family. This was home for me. So
mm,
yeah, it was
mm,
just like that. Sometimes you get into fight with your family members. Had a lot of those.
true.
you know. Sometimes, people will be wilding out, had a lot of those. Sometimes people would
True.
leave you shady messages on your phone, had a lot of those. Sometimes people would like, say crazy things about you, had a lot of those. But the community was strong, whether you were at the Masters of Rhythm,
Mhm,
like when I was in SA earlier in the year, I interviewed Bontle, and we were like
mhm,
talking about the whole Masters of Rhythm stuff. And I was like saying, I'm
mhm,
remembering the first time I'd seen her dance, and when I realized how old she really was, I'm like, at that time, I'm like, wow, that's so crazy. People were doing
mhm,
amazing things, you know what I mean? And
mhm,
so for me, yeah, being part of SA hip hop, the privilege and the blessing of being part of SA hip hop
mhm.
is something that I'll never take for granted. Because for
Yes.
me, it was never about, and it never has been about titles or anything. It really was. I was so passionate about it because outside of loving hip hop and growing up loving hip hop, SA hip
Mhm,
hop was and always will be my home, always will be my community. And it's so
mhm,
funny, like a lot of my friends, like some of my friends, and now like there was one particular friend of mine. We were in, I think we're in, was it Cape Town? I think we're in Cape Town. We're doing a shoot for something. She's not from South
mhm,
Africa, and she literally, we bump into somebody, and they come, like one of these, a rapper. They come running to me and start talking whatever. She's just like, why do you know all these people so well? I said, it's a very long story. I said, but I have a whole other life, and one day I'll explain it to you. So I have like people who
yeah,
like, because some people like see me doing stuff with like, especially before when I was doing 702 with ambassadors, wanting all this different stuff, and then
mhm,
and then all they'll see me doing stuff with a lot of people in Nigeria, the rest of the continent. But then the hip hop
mhm,
thing, they can never quite connect it. I said, guys, I literally like have a whole life. I'm always telling people, I'm like, I have a whole life. Or when people try to like suddenly, like, because I'm in Ghana at the moment, and they also
yeah,
have like a hip hop community here. And then I mean a lot of the rappers do know me because of MC Africa, so I was involved in that
yeah,
when I traveled around the continent. But some of the others who don't, like if somebody tries something, the other day I said, please don't start something you're gonna regret. I said, because if it comes to hip hop, I promise you I'm going to win this thing and you'll be so
mhm,
embarrassed. And so one of
mhm,
my other friends turns and looks at me, I'm like, please just tell them. I said, because I don't have the energy, but I will win this thing.
mhm,
So yeah, I
mhm.
don't know if I answered the question, but that's that.
True. No, no, no. Yeah, yeah. I feel, yeah, you've answered me well. But I mean, also you saying being a continuation, not just only you being in Harambe and because I remember also after hearing you from Harambe, and then I heard you on what's this rap activity jam. Man, the topics that you used to bring for rappers, I don't know, man. You
Yeah.
had this brilliant mind of being able to give them these ideas and topics. Like, how did you guys? Was it something that you discussed as a team? Before rappers come in or what?
No, 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 no. To be honest, those funny topics and the rounds and everything, that was
Yeah.
me because yeah, like the thing is, just in general as a person, I would say that I'm
Mm,
pretty creative. You know what I mean?
yeah. Yeah.
So, and my mind is always, I mean, just yesterday I was telling somebody, I said, no, I can't do XYZ because you don't understand. My mind doesn't shut down. So it goes
Mm,
like this and goes like 1 minute I'm
mm,
sitting in a car, the next minute I'm like chilling in DK in Soweto. And the people are
yeah.
like, how did you
Yeah.
get there? I'm like, oh, like this is what happened. That's how wild my head can be. So my
Mm,
mind can be. So I used to, because I so much enjoyed being involved in it. I always want to be able to bring something new and to bring something into it. And obviously
mm,
being somebody who loved the culture, though I was watching a lot of what was going on internationally and everything. And I'm like,
mm,
oh, how can we adapt this? So I literally, that was
mm,
literally me like playing out my own, like my adventures in my head. That's what was going on,
mm,
you know? So, because
mm,
yeah, I was like coming up with my adventures in my head, and I'm like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do that. And most of the time, the guys would be like, okay, you know what I mean? But I
mm,
also, because one of the roles I played on the show was I was actually the producer for the show as well, for
mhm,
Harame and all of that. So I also had to be able to do the content in such a way that it made sense for Thomas and for Sansa, and for
mm,
me, and for the
mm,
team as a whole. But then also with the hip hop stuff and all that stuff, I also had to be able to make sure that it made sense for people who were listening and participating. I just wanted it to
mm,
feel like Rap Olympics. I wanted it to feel like Like,
Yeah.
come on, let's have
Yeah.
some fun. I wanted it to be different. Like, every time people came, I
Yeah.
wanted them to know what was happening. Sometimes I would not even tell anyone. No one knew what was happening. It was just me, myself, and I. And I'm like, this is what
Mm,
we're doing for the beginning because I don't want anybody to say nothing. So yeah,
mm,
and I just thought that if we were going to be able to elevate the game, like that was one
mhm,
of the things I wanted to do. I always wanted to bring different things into it. And also like SA hip hop, like and SA rappers and MCs and all of that stuff, like are amongst the dopest in the world. I actually keep telling people I think South Africa is like in the top five hip hop capitals in the world, but actually
mhm,
top three. I just say top five
mhm,
because I don't want to upset nobody. Yeah, so for me it was just me having fun, like I always felt like I was always wilding out with people. I was having fun, like
mhm,
that's what it was all about for me more than anything. And also if I knew
mhm,
who was coming in, I also knew I'm gonna because I knew a lot of the guys from the different sessions. I was at the sessions, I was here,
mhm,
I knew who was what, I knew who was who, I knew who had beef with who. So in my mind I
mhm,
was like playing manipulation games because that was the cool thing about being
mhm.
in the culture and then being on
Yeah.
radio at the same. I had the ability to be able to bring out what was going on. You know what I mean?
Mm,
That somebody
mm,
else didn't know. So it was literally like, okay, my family's coming on. Let's make this a reunion, and let's get
mm,
everybody like let's get everyone into it. But it was literally a thing of
mm,
that's just how I am. I think I'm just overly creative and I'm always trying new things. But I also love the
mm.
culture, so I thought let's do it for the culture. Yeah.
Yeah, cause I remember, man, the way you had Reason and then Nabo Ntabi and who else was it? Adamas and those battles
And
were
Thomas, yeah, there were
and
so many
many
people.
others. Yeah, so
Yeah, there was
you
Liquid. There
just
was Liquid
transitioning
as
to
well, who was so dope. Like Liquid, I remember was so dope.
yeah,
There was so many people. Like I was always
yeah,
like, yeah. And the thing is, like with MCs, like I always wanted people to have a different experience and to not be fully prepared because that's the only way
mm,
that you would know how dope they were, right? And the whole thing about
mhm,
Rapid City Jam was about being able to flex. Like, were you a dope like freestyle MC? Were you like, people were coming in to show who's like an all-round MC or at least a battle MC or
yeah,
freestyle. That's what it was about. So if it was always
yeah,
the same, somebody could prep and could be like, okay, I know Kato will be there, so I'm gonna do this, or you know what I mean. And because even if somebody
yeah,
wasn't being paid on radio, the way that I felt like the interwebs were with hip hop
yeah,
and SA, even if somebody came
yeah,
in from PE, somebody in JSEC would still know what that person was about because somebody would have told them there's this cat and he's like this, he's like that, he's like that. So if
mhm,
I didn't add the topics and the flavor, people will be able to pre-prepare ahead of it. And then I'm
mhm,
like, that's not fun. I don't want to call people
mhm,
out for like, spitting rehearsed rhymes, basically.
mhm. So I mean, you transitioning to television with MC Africa, how was that like?
Oh, that was, I mean, that was so
'Cause now
weird
it's like
because
Africa, like you have this whole global, and everyone is watching.
mm, I mean, that was so crazy because I just remember literally I didn't how do I say I never tried out for it, I never applied for it,
Mm,
nothing like that. What it
mhm,
was like Yolisa Patra, she literally called. I'd interviewed her on
mm,
YFM for something, because when we did the other, we didn't always talk about hip hop. Like, so we had interviewed Yolisa about what is going on in Africa and all of that. And then I get called in and I get asked to do MC Africa. And literally, that's what
mm,
happened. And prior to that, I already had like because I was also part of African Hip Hop Radio, which was like
mhm,
an online radio platform that was, I mean, I think some guys in Netherlands had started it. So I already had
mhm,
people like in Egypt, like I knew so many hip hop like cats and like
mhm,
DJs and OAPs and everything from around the continent. There was already a community. I was already listening to the music and like chatting to people and everything. So when MC Africa came out, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy because I was already involved in that kind of thing.
mhm,
So yeah, so it was cool.
mhm.
Going to different countries, like I don't know, I've always just enjoyed like battles, and I've always enjoyed
Yeah.
sessions. So
Mhm,
I listen, I had fun. I don't want to lie. It was a lot of fun. It was stressful at times. The
mhm,
production part of TV is so stressful, but I had
mhm,
fun and I had like a lot of like hip hop quotable moments. So yeah, that was just like a blessing, and that also was a great introduction to me for like so many people that I got to know. Like for example, I'll say like when I was in Nigeria,
Yeah.
the team that was producing in Nigeria,
Mm-hmm.
the guy, the production company, the
Mm-hmm.
nephew for it is
Yeah.
Asa. Asa is the guy who is Davido's manager. Do you get what I mean? And
Okay.
Asa
Yeah.
was always there. And Asa was not was Asa is Davido's manager. And his uncle Obi was the guy who was Obi Asika from Storm Records. He was the one who was
Wow.
whose company was a producing company in Nigeria. And Nato C
Mm.
is Asa's cousin. So I met Asa
Wow.
like then, you know what I mean? So he was one of the few people who knew me
Mm.
from like the hip hop stuff. Because everybody else was
Yeah.
like, how do you, and Asa's like, you don't know this girl. You don't know this girl. Because we did the battles in like a abandoned building and all of that stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was like, yeah. So I mean, I from that hip hop has always been a way for me to meet like people, to make great connections because I feel that, hip hop at its best and at its purest, it just brings people together naturally. It just brings people
Yeah.
together.
Wow.
Also, what I love also not just only you being hip hop, but like they also gave you like an opportunity just to be the head in Channel O. Did you feel like that
Yeah.
was a bit more challenging? Because that's so like that was like in its prime, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, honestly, like every single opportunity that I've been blessed enough to have has been a challenge. I'll be honest, I was
Hmm.
never ever prepared. I was never like, I knew nothing about radio. I mean, I was on Voice of Bliss, but you can't compare that to what YFM was.
Hmm.
I literally was on radio. Like my first day at YFM was like a disaster. Like, I didn't even know what a producer was. I didn't know nothing. Thomas was late. Like the whole thing was wild. Like it was crazy. I got there were beer bottles everywhere. I'd never taken a taxi. Like this whole thing was wild to me. When I became YMAG
Hmm.
editor, I'm very bad at spelling. And
Yeah.
because I was writing the hip hop articles, and they were like, "Oh, do you want to just do it?" After Rude Boy stepped down, I was never prepared for that.
Yeah.
Every single time I got asked for something, I've never actually in my life been prepared. Even MC Africa, it was like TV was not my thing. I mean, I'd done interviews in SA, which was very different. But
Yeah.
like traveling around was like, yo, that's like different, to carry a show,
Hmm. Hmm.
sorry, to carry a show. And then being the head of Channel Africa as well, I was not prepared. I like then I was still showing up in sneakers. Like I tried, I remember to be like all dressy or whatever. And like after a week, I was like, yo, I can't actually do this. I just started bringing my sneakers in. It was just, because I was between South Africa and Nigeria and then traveling around the continent. So, but the two offices were in South Africa and Nigeria. So I was like, when my boss came in from Nigeria, then I would be dressed like, but
Yeah.
otherwise, oh my God, people knew Lee was gonna come with these sneakers, like that was what it was about. So, for me,
Yeah.
Channel O was like as significant, being like head of Channel O Africa was as significant as being part of the part of hip hop like at YFM, because at
Hmm.
that particular time, I remember when I joined Channel O Africa, I was assigned a lot of things. One of them was was for Big Brother Africa. I was one of the exec producers, so I was responsible for the Sunday night shows. And I
Hmm.
remember just that, like Wiz's performance in Big Brother Africa was like I got to curate all of that, like pick the artists, get everybody on, like Diamond, all these
Yeah.
people. So it was like crazy to be a part of that. When I joined Channel O, one of the first things I did, which is so wild, was to throw a party in this mansion and to invite people. We used Burner Boy's Like to Party song,
Hmm. Hmm.
so we sent it to people like it was a recording, to invite them
Hmm.
and everything. So that was a blessing to be able to have been part
Wow.
of YFM at that particular time. Like when I look at everything that's happening now, I'm like, that is so wild to have been, to be part of it. Like, from Burner to Wiz to Tiwa to Don Jazzy to you know what I mean? It was like
Hmm.
just like such a blessing. And yeah, so the admin and the work part of it was so
Hmm.
hard, but the socializing part of it was dope.
Hmm.
And coming up with creative
So so
ideas,
so so so
channel was cool.
so was the Tony Play interview also kind of weird? Because he's a politician and
Okay, so let me tell you, the Tony Blair interview, that was so weird because I actually wasn't meant to be doing it. Yeah, no, I
yeah.
wasn't meant to be doing it. So what happened was, And also remember it was the MTV guys, and I was like, yeah, I think that was actually before I got
Yeah,
to Channel. It was before I got to Channel. O, yeah, yeah. So what
yeah,
happened was
yeah,
that I think Tim Horwood and Swade were the ones who
yeah.
were doing. You know, Tim who used to be on Channel O, like with the dreads,
Mhm,
like yeah, Tim Horwood. So yeah,
mhm,
so he and Castle Out. So he was they were the people doing it, and we were on. I can't remember what rooftop it was. If we were at a Hyper Corner or something like that, and I was
mhm,
not auditioning. I was answering questions like testing camera. I can't remember
yeah,
why I was there. And then I
mm,
got asked to do it. Does that
yeah,
make sense? Like, yeah, I wasn't um
whoa,
like yeah, it was one of those things where when it happened, I was a bit like, oh, this is happening, I was like, oh, this is crazy. And my cousin was also part of it
mm,
because Navi is my cousin. So I'm like, oh, he's
mhm,
there too, you know what I mean? So I was
mm,
like, it was just one of those things. And I think for me, maybe it was because they sent the tapes. I can't remember where they sent it to, but because I was always passionate about like I thought like for me, because prior to that I'd also done work with UN Habitat around hip hop and all of that.
mm,
You see what I mean? And the impact that it
yeah,
could have. So I brought everything into what I was saying on camera. But I didn't like
mm,
know I was auditioning. I thought it was testing a camera. So that was
mhm,
like a bit crazy. I remember the day that it actually happened. We were, I think from like the morning, we were kept in a location, then we moved to another location, and then we were driven around in a van for a long time, and then we landed up at the place. I mean, the whole thing was so dramatic. I'm like, honestly, it's like, what is it? My friends in Nigeria would say, what is it
yeah,
again? I was like, we're
yeah,
literally going around and round and round and round in circles,
mm,
but doing the actual interview was actually amazing. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. Like when I think
mm,
of it now, and having all of those opportunities to be able to speak to like prime ministers and UN habitats and go to Norway for the UN and Spain and all that stuff, it was so
yeah,
crazy to be explaining the stuff to my dad or to my
yeah,
sister. Like my older sister is in diplomats, is she's like an international kind of diplomat. So she was doing
yeah,
international
yeah,
relations, and she was like in Japan studying like all dignified and everything. And they were all like, my whole
mm.
family was like, sorry, what do you do again? Like till now, they're like, no, what do you do in real life? What's your job? Also like my mom's family, like they were involved politically and stuff. So nobody could understand why I was there. And
Yeah,
I'm talking about hip hop, and they're like, no, 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 this
mhm.
doesn't even make sense. Like you're going to Norway for what? I said, no, it's like a hip hop thing. You're going to kind of, no, there's like a hip hop thing that we're doing, and they were just like, huh? No, it's
Yeah,
like for the UN hip hop, UN Habitat,
yeah,
UN this, like all of that. So it was quite wild, and I think my family a lot of times were kind of like, she's going, she's coming, she's saying it's the
mhm,
UN and hip hop. What can we say? But there
but
we
there
were.
wasn't that even odd because I mean like you also did like Avo Quincy Jones. That's like a different
Yeah,
generation of musicians
yeah.
and like the new generation.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, I think it was like also when all of that stuff was happening,
Hmm.
how do I explain it? It's like, you know what, when you're in the middle, I had to find a
Hmm.
way of saying it. Like, even when I think about being part of YFM and YMAG and all of the different stuff and the blessings I've had, because I really feel like it's a blessing. I honestly had doors open to me. um, you know, it's kind of like when you're in the middle of following your purpose or when you're in the middle of making history, it never feels like it, yeah? You just are going
Yeah,
about doing your thing. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So I was not
yeah,
looking at these things from the perspective of what they're being looked at. I was just like, every so often, like
yeah,
something dope was happening. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. And the rest of the time, it
yeah,
was just like, I'm going to Wits. I'm sneaking off because my dad doesn't really know that I'm going to radio. I've created a whole other
yeah,
name. I have to be back on time before he picks me up. You know what I mean? I've got a
yeah,
paper to hand in.
yeah,
I've got to do this. I can't fail. I can't do this. I got to do this.
yeah,
Thomas is giving me crap on radio. You know what I mean? And Sandra and Thomas are having a
yeah,
fight with
yeah,
me. Fresh has gone off with me. Da, da, da. I sit for the DJ meeting. Everybody will just tell you how crap you are, like in the middle of like all the DJs being there. It was like crazy.
yeah,
Like that's all that was happening. Channel, I'm like,
yeah,
oh gosh, I have to learn how to do Excel, budget forecasting. Now I have to pretend I know what I'm
yeah,
talking about. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. It was that kind of thing. Oh, now I've created this, now I've had this idea. Now we have to find a way of executing it. Now I have to find this person. Now I have to do that. Like, I literally was just like ticking off stuff, but I was enjoying it, but it wasn't
mm,
like, I wasn't thinking of it. So whenever people would like come up with the opportunity, oh, come and do this BBC, like I did the World Have Your Say where we broadcasted from Wendy's and Soweto. So they were like, can you do that? I'm like, okay,
yeah,
cool. The Quincy Jones thing, I'm like, okay, cool. it just was
Mm.
all part of like what my life was. So like there was nothing, it didn't feel fantastical. I mean, up until you said
Mm.
now the Quincy Jones thing, the reason why I stopped is because I straight forgot about it. I don't think I've thought about it in like 10 years. Straight forgot
Wow.
about it. Yeah, yeah, I straight
Wow.
forgot about it. But that just goes to
Mm.
show how much of my life was like filled with all of these like things that were just happening all the
Mm.
time, that for me were
Yeah.
like, oh, this is life. But I
Yeah.
guess they were like pretty big blessings and pretty big deals.
Yeah.
So I mean, you leaving radio, didn't it feel weird? And then do you feel like also the experience is what inspired you to actually start your own stuff, like the She Speaks Africa? I assume that you it's yours, right?
Yeah. Okay. So leaving radio, it was so weird. Like way before I left radio, I knew in
Yeah.
my heart and spirit it was time to leave. The
Yeah.
the station had changed so much.
Yeah.
And there were so many people that were there who would have my back that were not there anymore.
Yeah.
Also, like now hip hop was becoming, and radio and stuff uh was becoming a lot more commercial. So there were a lot more, like, how do I say, like, execs who were
Yeah.
involved. You know what I mean? There
Yeah.
were more
Yeah.
execs and like numbers people than they were people
Mm.
who were like visionaries, or people who were like, who understood culture, or people who would be like, hey, rude boy, do what it is that you want to do with the poetry, or hey, you know what I
Mm.
mean? People who were like
Yeah.
kind of allowed you to be who you were. It was more like
Yeah.
it became more of a formula. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I felt uncomfortable for the longest time. And I remember so many times I wanted to leave, so many times. Like a lot of the guys who were in hip hop that I was pretty close to, I had said this to many people. I'm like, yo, it's time to go. People were like, leave, but if you leave, but if you leave, but you leave. I remember I'd mentioned it to
Mm.
TTP, and so he convinced me to stay on. I'd mentioned it to Osmic Ace, convinced me to stay on. I mean, we ended up doing the bridge and all of that. I'd mentioned it
Mm.
to Kuli Chana, I remember, and he was like, stay
Mm.
on. Like people, and I know that it was all said from the best intent. So people were always like, stay, stay, stay. Like so many people were always saying that. And I
Mm.
felt like if I left, I'm going to be letting down a lot of people. But for the
Mm.
longest time, I was not. It was just not the same for me. It was, uh, it became very, like, it just was not the same. The game was not the same. The station was not the
Mm.
same. The
Mm.
objectives were not the same. It just was not
Mm.
great. Decisions were being made that I had no control over.
Mm.
Everything became very political. People were picking based on, you know what I mean?
Mm.
It was just about radio. It wasn't about culture, moving culture
Mhm.
forward. You know,
Mm.
and so it was like I was like, let me say, it was dead to me for a very long time. It
Mm.
was dead to me for a long time.
Mm.
I'd say maybe for almost 2.5 years. It was dead to me
Wow.
before I left. 2.5, if not 3 years before I left. Yeah.
Mm.
And so by the time I left, the only thing that upset me was that I feel like the whole situation was very manipulated.
Mm.
But I mean, like, now it's all come out that everything was like a setup, that Canton Pillay, he's been dealt with accordingly, because that's how he unfortunately handles business.
Mm.
And oddly enough, he actually apologized. He saw me at High Park Corner the one time, and he called me,
Mm.
trying to get me to the UIFM to, and you could tell he was trying to be apologetic. I'm like, yeah, there's just some stuff that you don't do, because I
Mm.
was so
Yeah.
upset with, and I was deeply hurt with the way that they had handled the situation. Um, you know,
Yeah.
basically because it was water that had spilled, and I was actually sick at the time, and I'm the one who called them and said, look, this water has spilled. And they made it sound to everybody like I was drinking alcohol. And literally, if you ask any
Yeah,
rapper,
yeah,
nobody had ever seen me drink. Like, I would never
Yes.
drink, I never took drugs, like nothing. I never smoked weed, like nothing. It was the
Yeah.
furthest thing from me. And the thing that was the most devastating about that wasn't so much what it was about me, it was for my dad, who was raising, his three daughters in a foreign country.
Yeah.
He had lost his wife, and he had raised us with a certain way. Now, all of his
Mm.
friends and people who work with him are reading this about his daughter that is not true. That is the
Mm.
thing that pissed me off about that, because I was disgracing a whole family name that had no business being disgraced. It was a lie.
Mm.
You're trying to drag me
Yeah.
into it. And what happened is that a few of the people who had, there was some people in management who actually left, because they felt like I'd been done, wrong by, like, because people who knew me, like people who saw me and everything, they would tell you, they were like, Lee, she doesn't drink, like whatever, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
They made up
Yeah.
the story that the desk, like, it was like it would be, I think they said something like 150,000
Oh yeah, I saw it in the
rand worth of
newspaper.
insurance. Yeah, but it's like if it was 150,000 rand worth of of damage, why was the studio used
Yeah.
the next morning? Why was it
Yeah.
used the
Yeah.
next morning? Do you understand? 150,000 means that it can't be used at all. It was used the next morning, and then it was only later on the next day when they were doing like tests to check if it was repaired. But the breakfast show used it,
Wow.
the lunchtime show. You know what I mean? Like things
Yeah.
like that. I'm like, that is very manipulative. And I
Wow.
felt like I was just a target because I represented what YFM had been. I was one of the last few people who had stayed there, who represented
True.
what
True.
YFM had been when it was at its peak. And because if I went into meetings, there were things that I wasn't going to do. I was asked to the one time to just swear or like and all of that stuff. I'm like, as
Yeah.
much as I spend time in hip hop, there's nobody who can say that you'd hear Lee cuss. People can tell you
Yeah.
now. That was not who I
Mm-hmm.
am, you know.
Yeah, I remember
And
you also
even,
used to reprimand them, the MCs when
yeah,
they swear. You used to warn them
exactly.
like, "Yo,
I could
guys."
Yeah, I could
Yeah.
be I could be at the sessions and I would never. So now you want me to be who I'm not. And because I won't do that, because I don't want to swear, because I don't want to be
Mhm.
like over get into a place of being over sexualized and all this nonsense. Now you're gonna
Yeah.
target me. You see what I mean? It's just like
Yeah.
rather just say, you know what I mean? And the thing is
Yeah.
that they when they initially wanted me to leave, I couldn't they also the station at that particular point, the new people couldn't get me to leave because a lot of the advertising and everything were tied to, they were like not tied to me, but it was like it was just going to, they had to make the ship look like it was stable. Do you understand what I mean? So if I left
Yeah.
also, it was going to be like, so they had to make something up. So that's the
Yeah.
thing that upset me about the YFM thing. But in my heart,
Ish.
I feel like it's my fault because it's like, I'm very, like, I'm Christian, right? And I pray about
Yes.
everything,
Yeah.
even everything I've ever done. And it's like I heard God saying leave, but I stayed, and that's the thing that's also like hurtful about it. But I feel like the way that they handled it was totally wrong, and I can speak about it now, many years later, like
Mm.
without tears or without hurt, because I'm just like, it's
Yeah.
lessons learned. Now when I hear something, when I know to move, I move. I don't wait,
Mm.
even if it doesn't make sense. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was
Yeah.
it was long before, because for me it was never about radio. My life has
Yeah.
always been and is always about purpose and fulfilling purpose and being in the right place and being able to
Yeah.
impact other people's lives. And for me, it's like I'm blessed enough for that to happen through culture and through creative. Like, yo, that is
Mm.
beyond a blessing. I'm not even going to lie. Like, it's beyond a blessing. You know what I mean? When I look at
Yeah.
like a lot of the guys in SA hip hop, like even some of the ones who've passed and everything, to
Yeah.
have known them, to have been a part of their journey, like it's you see that kind of stuff that makes me emotional. Like that means a lot.
Yeah.
It means a lot
Yeah.
to me when I've not been in SA in a long time, like and to
Mm.
go back and like when
Sorry,
we
Lee.
did, yeah.
Sorry for interrupting you now. Ish, my battery I think is gonna go flat because I got load shedding, so I can't charge. But
Oh,
but
okay,
it's fine. You
sorry.
can continue. So I'm just saying,
Okay,
just in case my
okay.
battery goes out, don't be surprised.
No, no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the thing that's so crazy for me is that, and I get emotional about it. Like even when I went back to Joburg, when I was in
Yeah.
SA earlier this year for Spotify, and meeting
Yeah.
people, like, just to have
Whoa.
seen the community, like bumping into Loyiso Gola, bumping into this, being in
Yeah.
Brampton, like that whole thing. And one of my very good friends, Sika, she's from Ghana. We know each other from Nigeria, and then she was in Ghana. She lived in SA, all of that. So she came with me, and she's always like, she's one of the people who's just like, this is crazy. I said, I know, I have a whole other life. It's like a whole other life. But that thing, it makes so much, like being in Bromfontein was just like a trigger. Like that's like basically my whole childhood. That's literally, the center of like, where I was. Okay, bye.